Welcome to the Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. Earlier in the week, SBM Intelligence published the Jollof Index, our quarterly report on food inflation in Nigeria and Ghana. The cost of cooking a pot of jollof rice has skyrocketed. In Ghana, it rose to 420 Ghana cedis, while in Nigeria, it went up 153% since 2023. Now, 27,528 naira. How are people dealing with the rising cost of food in both countries? Ghana's oil and gas sector is gaining momentum as Tullow Oil and Kosmos Energy advance major projects aimed at boosting productivity and enhancing energy security. Key initiatives include the Eni Sakofi field expansion, the Tolls Jubilee and TENS drilling campaign, and the Kumasi Jubilee Southeast development. How would these projects impact Ghana's domestic energy supply and economy in the long term? President Paul Biya of Cameroon has reshuffled the military, promoting several high-ranking officers, in which analysts view as a move of consolidating support ahead of the 2025 presidential elections. The elections have drawn a record 81 contenders. Could this military reshuffle influence Could this military reshuffle influence the elections coming up in Cameroon? Joining us today for further insights is Kofi Aguirre. He's the policy analyst at SBM covering Ghana. Welcome, Kofi, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Vero.
Oh, let's start with our first story. So our first story is the Jollof Rice Index produced by SBM Intelligence. Please, can you share with us what are the primary drivers from the report behind the significant cost of jollof rice, the increase in both Nigeria and Ghana, and how do these factors compare in both countries? But also for our listeners, like if we're having new listeners, I just a little background of what the Jollof Rice Index is as well and what it aims to do.
Well, so in both Ghana and Nigeria, or let me say West Africa, food inflation is really important because of the food insecurity. And then also, if you look at some of the supply restrictions. And so Jollof Index, for instance, actually measures how a staple like jollof, which is common in West Africa, especially Ghana and Nigeria, how prices have actually fared, interquarter. And so if you look at the recent reports, it shows how prices have actually gone up in Nigeria. In Ghana as well, prices have actually gone up, but have actually gone up more in Nigeria than in Ghana. So in Ghana, if you are talking about preparing standard jollof for a family of five, you need about $40 to actually do that, which is simply because of the high cost of the ingredients such as rice, tomatoes, and meat, or let's say fish, that actually goes into the preparation of jollof. So definitely, once you have the ingredients going up or prices increasing, this affects the index. And I remember somewhere last year or somewhere 2023, the amount you needed to prepare a standard jollof for a family of five in Ghana was relatively less than we are recording this year. Although prices have stayed stable in Ghana because of some supply restrictions, and then also the fact that prices are always sticky downwards, it is actually very difficult to record significant price changes, and not just the prices, right? Where we have the pass-through effect of exchange rates, and then also the instability around the northern borders of the country, where we get a significant component of our grains from, all affecting the Jollof Index that we have currently.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the last time that we spoke, it was the time where you had the new elections, you had the new
Mhm.
president come in for his second tenure. Um, how is he trying to address like food security and ensuring that, I mean, Ghana is food, like addresses like food sufficiency? I mean, it would be interesting to see like the changes from the past government and then the present administration, what they are trying to do to address that. And also, I mean, the citizens definitely were happy to have him come back as well. In the numbers that we had that voted for him as well. How are they responding as well to this? Is there like, would I say like agitations to say, okay, you're not addressing it, or is he addressing the solutions? Kind
Well, so I mean, the current government, which is President John Dramani Mahama, who is having his second term, currently is enjoying a lot of goodwill from the people, and it's simply because of the sins of the previous administration, where even if you look at the election results, you see how he won the election by more than 56%. It never really happens in our political history where a political party wins presidential election with such a big margin. And if you look at over 40% of registered voters deciding not to participate in the election, which affected turnout and all of that, shows how people were tired of the previous administration and how they were looking for hope in the John Mahama administration. I will say his first 6 months, things have been positive, where you see food inflation moving from the regions of 30%. Now we are talking about somewhere, I mean, a little below 15%. Inflation in general has moved from 54% in December of 2022. Now we are talking about 13.7%, and there are projections that we could reach single digits inflation. Talking about food security and how this government is addressing it. He actually came to meet a situation where there was some sort of tension between Ghana and Burkina Faso because of comments of the previous government, where he said Burkina Faso were contracting mercenaries from Russia to fight or as terrorists, and then also to fight in the borders. I mean around the borders of the northern borders of Ghana, and that actually sparked some sort of controversy between Ghana and Burkina Faso. But with the introduction of President Mahama, he has been able to restore that relationship between Ghana and Burkina Faso. And what really happened was that, Ghana imports a significant part of its tomatoes, onions, and pepper from Burkina Faso. And annually, we spend more than $200 million importing tomatoes, onions, and pepper, and its related products from other parts of the world. And Burkina Faso and Burkina and Niger are countries where we import a lot of, especially if you're looking at grains like maize and then millet. So when that happened, it affected cargo coming from Burkina Faso to Ghana. But the president himself had to take steps to actually go in talks with the Burkinabe authorities, and this was actually settled, and that has really helped with the supply chain, and then also the fact that you have some of this food available, and also helping prices not to skyrocket. And there's also a deliberate effort by this government to introduce what they call the 24-hour economy, where essentially, as part of its 8 pillars to drive economic growth in Ghana, there is a part called Grow Economy, where the government is looking at growing some of the, certain things in here and to reduce the import bill of the country, trying to follow the footsteps of Nigeria when it comes to deciding not to import rice and then consuming what is produced locally. And so essentially, you could see a clear path where on the side of policy, government has been able to reduce the fluctuations in the exchange rate space. Currently, due to the some of the policies put in place by this government, the cedi is the best performing currency against the dollar globally. appreciating by more than 40% against the greenback. And also, if you go to the pumps where fuel prices have actually fallen by more than 30%, and that has actually reduced transport costs by more than 20%, affecting producer inflation and making food available on the market at a cheaper rate. Other than that, it's possible to have recorded a higher Jollof Index, maybe like the way Nigeria is recording now.
Interesting. I mean, it's also good to learn about some of the initiatives that the government is taking and the steps that are taking to grow the economy. Let's move over to the oil and gas sector. We're seeing a lot of response from different companies. So like Eni, Tullow, and Kumasi, they are revamping up their activities. What short-term or medium-term impact can this have, and what can we expect on Ghana's energy independence and the fuel prices as well?
Well, I mean, Ghana has been through a lot when it comes to its oil and gas space, where it's been 15 years since we started development and then exploration, development, and production, where Tullow was the first to come in the space. And we've actually declined from producing about 71 million barrels in 2019, now talking about a little about 45 million barrels in 2024. And this is simply because of what happened in the last, let's say, 5 or 7 years, where contracts have not been signed. I mean, oil and gas agreements have not been signed, possibly because of the terms and conditions of the contract. Where globally, we've all seen how oil companies and oil firms are shifting from the Gulf of Guinea to Guyana, where it has become relatively easier to produce and explore in those areas. And so you have ExxonMobil exiting the space in 2021, and other companies also exiting. Eka Energy exited somewhere 2023 because of some of these contractual issues and agreements where there are, I mean, civil society organizations who feel that Ghana must get or must benefit a lot more from the oil we drill. But I mean, investors who also come here are doing comparative analysis and trying to see producing in Ghana, is it economically viable if you compare it to, let's say, producing in Guyana? So I think that the success story of Guyana is really affecting countries along the Gulf of Guinea like Ghana. And if you look at even the trade part, where if oil is actually drilled in Ghana, look at how it is transported from through the transatlantic ocean, and look at how far it goes. And I mean, compare that to Guyana and how easy it is to get the oil to Europe and America, where I mean, this oil is really needed. And so I would say that although Ghana is still producing above 45 million barrels per year, the current success story of Guyana is affecting us, where I mean, investors and oil firms, and this is a space that demands a lot of capital. And so if you have people coming in, they want to make sure they get the best out of the deals they struck. And then also, I mean, nobody likes noise. If you come into a space and then there are tax arbitrations like the way you see between Tullow and Ghana. I mean, just last year there were three tax arbitrations. There were three arbitrations of which Tullow has won one, two more at the International Court of Arbitration between Ghana and Tullow. So all of these things are not healthy for the space. Of course, the president is aware, and he knows that the shift towards fossil fuel to renewable is also affecting West African countries, and so it will be good to possibly look at the whole equation on both sides and say, if we keep this oil for a certain period of time, the world is shifting to renewable energy. What happens to us? And so you hear the president calling on international firms to come to the table for agreement to start exploration, to start development, and hopefully to start production. Because currently you have the country signing about 14 oil and gas agreement, but just two of the companies, ENI and Tullow Oil, are currently the only companies doing production. I would say Pecan Energies, which came into the space, is now at development stage, but the remaining 14 out of the 16 oil agreements we have currently are all at development stage. And sometimes it's so difficult to move these companies from development to I mean production. But the success story is that because of the current windfall that the Ghanaian economy is enjoying and the positive sentiment, you see investors coming back. So we have seen Shell deciding to join the development of the Pecan fields, which is currently at the development stage. And so with such investment and big players like Shell coming in, we are hoping that the Pecan field will start production, and that could add up to the existing tool we have, and we could start producing maybe beyond 60 million barrels per year.
How do you see going forward that, Ghana can position itself to be able to ensure that the revenue that is coming out from oil and gas, you know, translates into sustainable development and increases growth? Because I mean, we can learn from the example of Nigeria, where when we had the oil money coming, the oil boom, as they say, we didn't necessarily manage the money as we should have, or we should have. Yeah. So what do you think Ghana can learn from that lesson as well to ensure that that money that comes from the oil also translates into providing a better sustainable life and development for the people of Ghana?
Also, definitely, we've learned from the lessons of Nigeria, and Nigeria gives us a good template of how not to use oil money, right? So, you have right from the beginning setting up the Public Interest Accountability Committee, which in Ghana we call PIAC. So it is responsible for auditing and actually overseeing inflows from the oil space. And then also, you don't have the money going to government directly. There are statutory accounts that oil revenue actually goes through. There's every year there's what we call ABFA, annual budget fund amount that comes from oil revenue that goes to support that budget. There's a component that goes to a heritage fund to cater for future needs and all of that. And so there's a clear path and there's proper legislation around the use of oil money. Let me put it that way, in Ghana, and definitely the templates. Nigeria's template has given us a lot to also learn from. But of course, definitely you have slippages. Definitely you have some state entities misusing oil funds under declaration and then what have you. That is the level that we are at the moment. And in terms of even trying to execute some corporate social responsibilities of, let's say, I mean, some of the oil companies, you find some of these, I mean, difficulties. But I would say that so far so good. It's not as bad as other templates across West Africa. The only suggestion or the only cry of many civil society organizations in Ghana is how to move or is how to revise the agreements we signed with these oil firms or big oil firms 15 years ago. How do we revise it to get more royalties, more corporate income taxes, more of the interest, and more of the inflows that come from the oil space? And so the conversation is shifting towards how to get more of the oil we produce. So you see Ghana producing or exporting on average $3 billion worth of oil every year, but just about 15% comes to the states as real revenue. And so the conversation is around moving that percentage, I mean, a notch higher, and then also getting more from the inflows from the oil space.
Quite remarkable. Um, let's Let's move on to our final story. President Paul Biya of Cameroon has just reshuffled his military and he's promoting several high-ranking officials. And a lot of analysts are viewing this move as his effort to ensure that he secures his win in the next elections, which is going on this year. What message do you think that he's trying to send with this reshuffle? I mean, we've had him being in office for a very long time, and a lot of people have been calling for his exit, but it seems like he's not ready to leave. What are your thoughts on this as well?
I mean, the wind of anti-democracy is blowing across Africa. It's not just Cameroon. Just look at what is happening in Togo and what is happening in Ivory Coast, where Tiam, who is supposed to be the main opposition leader, it's actually being asked that you cannot participate in the upcoming election in October, and then you also have I mean Bagbo saying that he wants to run for a second term. Ouattara was saying that he wants to run for a second term. So it's not just Cameroon. It reminds me of what happened 2 years ago and a year ago in several parts of West Africa where democratic principles were actually trampled upon. So in the case of Cameroon, it's so easy. And in Africa, when you see some of these things, it's a clear sign that there is an attempt to actually possibly twist the hands of democracy to favor those who are in power. This will not be the first time something like that is happening, but I mean, it's just the modus operandi that's actually changing in Cameroon, where this time around it's not about barring opposition leaders from contesting, but rather possibly using the military. But yeah, so I mean, I was saying that it's not new in Africa. It's just that in Cameroon's case, you see the modus operandi a bit different from the templates we saw 2, 3, or 4 years ago, where now I don't know if it's going to be the military that the president is going to use to actually circumvent the process, but it's a clear indication of how francophone countries, or let's say countries that were actually colonized by the French, are actually moving away from democracy. We've seen Burkina Faso, we've seen Niger, we've seen Mali, we've seen other francophone countries, and in fact, this is not something new. But what I'll say is that another thing that is also happening, and we don't have to lose sight of, is that when the people decide that they want to vote against you, it will come with a margin that it will be so difficult to actually overturn. We've seen that happening in Ghana, where the opposition leader won with 56%. We've seen that in other parts of the in Africa. And so it all depends on how the voter turnouts, how things will be run, and all of that. But I don't see this to be something new. It's a clear indication of how anti-democracy is becoming a thing in Africa, and the Afrobarometer report shows that there is less and less appreciation of democratic means of electing leaders in Africa. And in fact, when some of these things happen, it makes it so easy for those who are already in power to use some of the states institutions and let's say security agencies to actually orchestrate what they actually want in order for them to stay in power for a long time.
I mean, it's interesting that you said it's not something new. Obviously, we've seen it happen in several African countries as well. But one thing that is a record I'm saying is like you have 81 contenders, right? So what do you think is fueling 81 contenders to come out to say, I want to run for office? And the highest office of the day. And do you think that this is a distraction? If you have 81 people coming out, Isn't that like a distraction to say, okay, at the end of the day, Paul Biya may still win because he may have loyal supporters who will vote for him, as opposed to how are they going to spread it within the number that they are seeing that it's high.
Well, I mean, two things. It shows that the wind of change is so I mean high in Cameroon that both the incumbent and opposition leaders, opposition parties are actually sensing it. So it's either it's on both sides. I mean, it can be an advantage to the incumbent. It can also be a disadvantage to him. Why do I say this? Because once you have more, I mean, 81 contenders coming in, what happens is that if they are all supposed to vote in line to actually elect one opposition leader to possibly take over the incumbent government, it becomes so difficult because you have the votes spread across different political parties, and I mean, at the end of the day, it will benefit the incumbent government. So it could be, I mean, a strategy that the current or the incumbent government possibly will be using, allowing more opposition leaders to actually contest so that it actually diffuses the power that the main contender might be able to get. Because the more people get into this the space, the more voters are likely to possibly vote on different sides. It happened in Ghana where there were more than 10 candidates on the ballot. And what happened was that it knocked out main opposition leaders, not the regular two parties we know, but I mean, there were third forces. It made the possibility of getting a third force very, very difficult. So in the case of Cameroon, this will make the possibility of getting a second force difficult because you have 81 people. And the question is, how will people distribute their votes across board? And that, for me, will affect the possibility of creating a formidable second force that will actually contest or that will actually pose a threat to the incumbent government. And so it could be a disadvantage to the incumbent government. And then also the incumbent government can also stand on this and say that, well, I mean, I allowed more people to come in to contest. It shows a sign of multi-party democracy and all of that. But behind the scenes, we all know how such systems are actually tweaked to suit or to actually favor the incumbent government. And it's not like um, your typical India, which is the biggest democracy in the world, where over 800 people go to the polls to go and vote. Political parties are high. I mean, the total number of political parties it's actually very, very big. I mean, a big number. It's not same in Cameroon. And so when you see some of these things happening and unprecedented, allowing people to contest, it could be a strategy of the incumbent government to actually make sure that they diffuse the power or the possibility of getting a strong second force that will actually be a threat to the incumbent architecture.
Thank you so much, Kofi, for joining us on today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. To all our listeners, the podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. For deeper insights into our work, just like the Jollof Rice report that we spoke about today, you can visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.